talk about shutdown, we heard it was about 2 weeks. 2 weeks to curb the issues so that the hospitals didn't get overrun. And now it's going on, 2 years. You're saying it's going to be with us a whole lot longer. And we've seen countries act quite differently. Western countries like Australia, amazingly seeming to curtail freedoms for security. And this is that age-old, spectrum question. Do I want more security or more freedom? Well, if I want to be alive, I want security so that I can be alive to be free. Give me liberty or give me death, as it were. So, we have this new thing that has created havoc. We've learned a lot since that first 2 weeks, and there's been a lot of shutdown. There's been lockdown. There has been put down over people who, let's say, didn't get the vaccination, maybe because they're concerned about what we're seeing in our country in the U.S., where you're at in Canada, across the world now, about the politicization of medicine. I think most people will probably see that, say, Dr. Fauci, for example, said some things early on and then later justified it in good utilitarian ethicist fashion, that the end justifies the means, and justified telling a white lie for the greater good. And people now are saying, okay, what could he be lying? What could they be lying about now? And further, when doctors come out as area experts, because most of us aren't doctors, even those of us who have doctorates still really don't know, where to turn on all of this, because politicization has happened on this and every topic right now, where big tech, social media, and media, it's called cancel culture in the West. Unless it's the political truth, it's more political science than science sometimes. People just aren't so sure what to do. They don't want to sacrifice their families. That's not loving if they can't trust the information coming down the pike. And so this question over security and freedom, they want the freedom to be secure. They want to give this more time, perhaps. They, as Christians, want to do the right thing. They want to help people out. And if that means being vaccinated, great. But what are we supposed to believe? How do we overcome this bit of not unreasonable skepticism now?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you're raising the profound problems of political philosophy of our age. And, I don't pretend to be an authority on those matters. I think I would take a step back on this, actually, and put these large issues of how we respond to disagreement in the broader context of the ways in which views on conscience and freedom of conscience have evolved more generally in our generation and with the secularization of society. I think that one of the gifts of Christianity to society was a very high view of individual conscience. The notion that each of us, as a creature made in the image of God, is endowed with moral reason and moral judgment, and that there's a very much a sense in which no one can sit in moral authority over you to tell you that you're necessarily wrong or right, but that each of us, as creatures made in God's image, equally have access to moral right and wrong. I mean, you're a philosopher, so you might have a lot of interesting things to say about this. But it seems to me that one of the things that's changed, and I saw this change happening before COVID came along, particularly with respect to, say, freedom of conscience in healthcare in Canada, was an evolving sense that sort of that we can overrule the moral knowledge and authority of others, that we can expect them to conform to our own particular moral ways of thinking. And that we're going to, and where people disagree, because of the difficulty of establishing moral right and wrong that we've inherited potentially from postmodernity. The only option is to coerce, because there's no real basis for persuasion. And I've seen that. So, this is a big problem in Canada right now with respect to freedom of conscience for physicians, around issues like physician-assisted death and abortion and so on. And I think it's that loss of confidence in the ability to do the work of moral persuasion, together with a diminished view of what a human is, a kind of dehumanization that's occurring, and a loss of sense of what meaningful human flourishing really looks like. All of those things combined together have created this kind of technopoly where, everything's about preventing the spread of infection at all costs, and we have no coherent way of balancing the risks and benefits. I confess I myself have really struggled to balance the risks and benefits. I think, for example, the evidence is now pretty clear that the benefit of masking is probably very small, but it's certainly not zero.
Mm-hmm.
So do we make millions of people masks to save hundreds of lives? I don't know how to balance that exactly. I personally feel a bit uncertain. I've been an advocate of masking throughout the pandemic based on the data that we have and the reasonable presumption that it's appropriate. But I think these things force us to think very carefully about how we weigh these different factors. And I think the truth is, this is why we need thoughtful Christianity, people equipped to engage the life of the Christian mind and bring to bear the deep traditions we've inherited from Christianity over the last millennia, to say, how we prioritize human life, what does human flourishing look like, what are the costs and benefits of keeping ourselves apart, and for how long do we continue to do this? At what point do we start to accept different costs? And Christians might answer that a bit differently than others. We're just not afraid of dying.
That's
as
true.
faithful believers,
Right?
And I think that's a big part of this, to be honest, is that we're just not afraid of dying. So we don't feel the urgency of getting vaccinated in that sense, the way that others might. But I think all these different factors. But I think what's going on is, I'm talking a lot, but I think what's going on is very deep. It's not. These are not surface issues. These are deep issues about shifting understanding of what it means to be human.
Right.
And that's the challenge that we're facing.